Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farber. A new era has dawned globally. The old liberal rulebook is torn up and it's now the age of nations, said Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, outlining Hungary's foreign policy for 2026. As Budapest doubles down on its positions regarding Ukraine, migration, Russian energy, and EU obligations, questions emerge about Hungary's role in regional security and European alliances. Now, to analyze the impact of Orbán's speech, we're joined by Péter Balázs, former European Commissioner and Hungary's former Foreign Minister. Thanks so much for being again with us here on TVP World. Good to have you.
Good morning.
Mr. Balázs, let's begin with that first quote by Prime Minister Orbán, but I want to connect it to the coalition of the willing. I mean, this is something that Hungary is not part of, but yet at the same time, with that kind of statement, with the impact now of the coalition, how are these two reconciled, if at all, and what does this mean going forward for Ukraine and Hungary's role?
Well, in the perception of Viktor Orbán, Ukraine is not a friend of Hungary, and Orbán is not supporting the help, the acts of Ukraine. At the same time, it is true that the Hungarian government is voting and has been voting sanctions against Russia, with open criticism, but adding its voice. It is not always the case because Hungary is frequently using its veto in EU position takings. This has been the case with Venezuela, now Hungary being the only EU member not co-signing the common position. Now, the issue was much more important than just a declaration of the government, because on the 5th of January, Orbán has been holding an international press conference, which is rather rare in his practice. Usually he's meeting the international press once a year, and he's not receiving journalists except a few selected people. On the 5th of January, he was holding an international press conference with highly selected participants and has been there for 2.5 hours for answering questions, both on foreign policy and internal policy in view of the coming parliamentary elections in Hungary. Date hasn't been retained yet, but according to the rules, elections should take place sometimes early April. So he has been opening the hot phase of the campaign.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get to that campaign and that election cycle in a moment, but I do want to come back to what you've said about Hungary and Ukraine, saying that Hungary is not a friend of Ukraine, and I think the Prime Minister has ruled out any kind of troops and soldiers or weapons to Ukraine. He says that we will, I'm quoting here, we will mobilize our economic resources for Hungarians. What kind of resources could those be? And at this point, is Hungary isolating itself, not being part of all these structures around it in the coalition of the willing with the European Union?
Well, I think Orbán is going even further because he has positioned Hungary against any action in favor of Ukraine, and he pretended on its last international press conference that our money is being given to Ukraine for the reason that some important part share of European funds has been suspended because of rule of law deficiencies with Hungary. This money is badly missing from the Hungarian budget, from financing major projects, and Orbán has been lying on its issue, saying that because of Ukraine is getting money, Hungary is not getting this money, which is obviously not true. At the same time, I should add that there is a small Hungarian minority in Ukraine near to the border in Transcarpathia, And those people are suffering under the Russian aggression against the Ukraine. Men are serving in the army and dying for Ukraine, for their homeland. And Orban is neglecting that fact, is not expressing solidarity with those Hungarians with Ukrainian citizenship and being under the problems of the war, actually.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, Mr. Balázs, that you bring up this minority in Ukraine, this Hungarian minority. There's also the same if we look at Slovakia. And I'm just curious, I mean, Orban has touted that he wants stronger rights for Hungarians, that he's touted this history of Hungarians. He wants to step in for them. What about this new rift now with Slovakia, with this Beneš decree? How does he square that? How does this move forward? Because this is sort of now a difficult challenge for him as well.
Well, this is a very interesting case and a challenge at the same time for the Orban government. It's true because in Slovakia, a new law has been adapted by of last year, punishing any critics on the Beneš decrees. Now, this is a very old story because Edvard Beneš used to be the president of Czechoslovakia after the Second World War. And in 1947, he has adapted a long series, a high number of various decrees, altogether 143 decrees, and about 10% of those decrees were about the collective sins of the Hungarian minorities in Czechoslovakia during the Second World War. First of all, this is highly unjust to punish collectivity because of the actions of some individuals. But this was the case, and since then, those decrees are still in force in the successor states of the former Czechoslovakia, in the Czech Republic, and in Slovakia. But somehow it was swept under the carpet. It was a silent part of the legal system. Now, concrete case has recalled the issue because highway is being constructed in Slovakia. They had to expropriate some lands for building this highway near to Bratislava. And somebody found out that the owners of some pieces of land are Hungarians who has been deprived from their property back in 1947, according to those decrees. So an absurd case, absurd legal case. It shouldn't take place. And the interesting thing is that for the time being, the two prime ministers, Robert Fico in Slovakia and Viktor Orbán in Hungary, are close friends, close political allies. They are following very similar principles. Both are stressing the importance of nations instead of European cooperation, and so it would be so simple to take the phones for Viktor Orbán, to call his friends Robert Fico and to tell him that it is not a timely issue. They shouldn't play with historical problems today. They should put the emphasis on good neighborhood policy between the two
on that note,
states.
Mr. Balázs, speaking of timeliness and also nation states, I mean, this goes back to that quote I started with in the beginning about Orban saying new era has dawned globally. The old liberal rule book is torn up, and now the age of nations. If we look at also, if that's really the case in Orban's mind, if we're looking also at Venezuela, what's happened there in these last days, Hungary's refusal to sign that declaration with the European Union, how does Hungary now look at that situation in Venezuela? I mean, there's also apparently, allegedly today, the opposition holding anti-Trump protests in front of the U.S. Embassy in Budapest. What's Hungary's position? What's Orban going to do about Venezuela?
Well, as I mentioned, Orban was the only one who has not co-signed this common declaration of the European Union about Venezuela, which was a highly balanced position taking, so no problem with that. You can find very strong parallels between positions of Orban and his government and the parliamentary family in the European Parliament of the Patriots group with nationalist, populist political parties. So this is one explanation. Those countries which would like to decrease the importance of the EU, to deprive the EU from some positions, institutions, not to maintain the European Parliament, but to change it for a meeting of national members of national parliaments, and so on and so on. And their next ally is the new president of the old president of the United States, Donald Trump. The Heritage Foundation in the United States, which is also has an ally in Poland, the Ordo Iuris organization, and the Heritage, Ordo Iuris, and the Max Corvinus College in Hungary under the dictatorship of Mr. Orban have worked out a project about the European Union, how to go back in history to an intergovernmental level of cooperation instead of the Union.
Mr. Balázs, I'm conscious of the time. Just one word, if we're looking at the next few months ahead in Hungary, elections are coming up. One word, what's going to happen in Hungary, just as we close?
For the first time since the last 16 years, 4 periods of the Orban government, there is a new challenger for Mr. Orban. And this is the TISA party with Péter Balázs at the head of this party, who has a great success. And according to opinion polls, this party is ahead of the ruling Fidesz in public opinion sondage. Now, time is very long.
I'll have to jump in on there. I'm really sorry about it. But the new challenger, I'm sure we're going to discuss him in the near future. More on that. Look, well, thanks so much. As always, a pleasure having you here on the program. Péter Balázs, much appreciated. Thank you. And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks. But stay right here for more news and commentary on TVP World. Goodbye.